Welcome to Stay at Home Wellness, where we talk about why wellness is so different for stay at home moms and what to do about it. Today, we are diving into 5 feeding mistakes I see parents make all the time. And I'm so sympathetic to this because feeding your kid is hard. Toddlers and babies do not eat the same way as adults, and it can be really, really confusing. There's lots of stuff on the internet about this. So I just wanted to share some mistakes I see people making and then the way to fix them, because I know all of you, if you're watching this, you don't just want to know, oh, I'm doing this wrong. You want to know how to actually fix them. So let's go ahead and dive into the first mistake that I see people making. And the first mistake that I see people making is letting their kid determine what and when to eat. So on the internet, it's really, really common to find things on Instagram or on blogs that talk about the beauty of how your child knows what their body needs all the time. And while this is true, your toddler or baby is also very young and they don't know what a balanced meal looks like, and they don't know what and when they should be eating. So what can happen is parents think, okay, my toddler knows what's good for their body. They know their hunger and fullness cues, which are true, but then they turn over the what and the when to their toddler as well, and they are not ready for that at all. So the parent is responsible for what the toddler eats and when the toddler is eating it. So that means the parent is the one presenting the toddler with a plate of food or with bowls of food on the table. The toddler is not the one deciding what they want for meals, because toddlers don't know that they need fruits and veggies, right? They don't know that their body needs protein and carbs, but the parent does. This doesn't mean that the parent should control every bite that goes into their mouth, that they should require them to clean their whole plate, things like that. This can actually affect hunger and fullness cues and their ability to sense those, and that could be a really negative thing for the child. But it does mean that the parent is the one deciding what types of food the child eats, because the child is not ready for that yet. It's not developmentally appropriate to expect them to do that. The other thing is that a lot of parents allow their child to decide when to eat. And oftentimes what this looks like is the parent gives the child a beautiful meal. Maybe it's roasted veggies and potatoes and chicken breasts or something like that. And the child eats 3 bites and then says they're not hungry, okay? So a lot of parents say, okay, that's fine. But then the child wants a snack half an hour later, and the parent is concerned because the child didn't eat enough, and they give them a snack half an hour later. And what this does is it perpetuates a cycle where the child gets most of their nutrition from snacks and very little from meals. And worse yet, oftentimes the child is deciding what they're getting for snacks. So it's a very child-based way to feed your child, and it's not developmentally appropriate because they're not able to know what foods are good for them. So if you're a parent that is doing this, I would recommend that you start by having structured meals and snacks. And what that looks like is you have a certain time where you have snacks. Most days it doesn't have to be 9:32 on the dot, but you usually have a mid-morning snack. You usually have a mid-afternoon snack. You get to decide if you want to have a snack before bed or not. I usually just do 2 during the day, and then dinner that is a filling dinner at night, and my kids go to bed at 8, so they really don't need another snack in there. But you decide when those snacks will be, and the child can decide if they're not hungry for the snack. The child can decide to only eat a couple bites at dinner. That's perfectly fine, because sometimes, honestly, the kid has eaten so much at a prior meal or a prior day that if you're force feeding them all the time, they're going to lose their awareness of hunger and fullness cues. But this is the but. If your child decides not to eat very much for dinner, it is not their prerogative to then be able to demand a snack half an hour later, because this will teach them, if I don't like what mom made for dinner, then I could just fill up on Teddy Grahams or whatever you give them for snack half an hour later, and it will be fine, and it will be the food that I prefer. And it actually encourages them to narrow their palate, okay? So on the flip side, if your child decides, I'm not eating very much for dinner tonight, that is perfectly fine, and you don't have to make a big deal of it. You don't have to beg them or plead them or get angry at them if they don't eat as much as you think is appropriate. But if they say they're hungry, you could say, oh, that's fine, we're having food tomorrow for breakfast, okay? And pretty fast they will learn to look forward to mealtime and to fill up. And I've had kids that initially sit at the table, they're not very excited about the food, but then they realize, like, they're hungry and this is the food we're eating, and they go ahead and they eat that food, and that is super encouraging. So that is my number one thing that I've seen parents do that I would not recommend, is allowing your kid to eat when and allowing them to eat whatever they would like. You need to be in charge of that as a parent. The second mistake I have seen parents make, and this happens a lot, especially for parents that are really into the division of responsibility but don't quite understand it, who have heard a lot about intuitive eating and how your body needs to know hunger and fullness cues. But the second thing that often happens is that if a kid doesn't like a food that is being served or they're not eating very much, the parent that is overzealous and loves their kid so much is like, oh no, my kid isn't eating food at dinner. I'm going to give them another food instead. So it might be at the dinner table, but they see my kid really isn't eating the lasagna very well. So they pull out some puffs or whatever. They pull out the kid's favorite snack. And again, this teaches the kid, okay, if I don't eat this food, then I will get my very, very favorite food, right? And it makes sense as, from our perspective, like which of us wouldn't rather have ice cream at some meals than eat whatever, eat chicken, right? Like sometimes we have something that is more palatably desirable, but we as adults know if we ate ice cream for every meal, we would feel sick, we would feel sluggish, we wouldn't feel energized, right? And we know it would have negative effects on our well-being, but toddlers don't know that. So again, they're not capable of deciding. And I think another thing parents don't think about is if they're doing this, it really puts them in a position where they're almost like a short order cook sometimes, where they're trying to please their child. So sometimes they pull out a snack, the child doesn't like that. Then they're saying, okay, well, do you want a sandwich? What do you want, right? And it's putting the child in total control. And what I've seen over and over again is the child actually eats a way less quality diet and a way less diverse diet, and they're less prepared for adulthood where they will be exposed to a variety of foods. Counting is like the hardest part of doing these podcasts. The third mistake that I've seen parents often making when it comes to food is bribing their children with food. So this can look like saying something like, if you don't eat all of your peas, you will not get ice cream to eat. And what does that communicate to the child? That actually communicates to the child that peas are undesirable and ice cream is highly desirable, and you have to go through the undesirable thing to get the desirable thing. And this works well if it's something like running or something like that, and you're like, okay, if we finish the run, we get to sit down and take a break, right? But what you don't want to do is basically what it's teaching your child is these peas are so disgusting that the only way you will possibly want to eat them is if there's ice cream on the other side. Rather than letting them explore the peas, oftentimes my kids just try a few, they eat other things on their plate, they come back to them.
We're taking a quick break from our episode to let you know about our sponsor for today's episode, and that is Calm Max Trampoline. And I love this trampoline so much for kids if you're thinking about getting them a Christmas gift or birthday gift. I know right now Christmas is just around the corner, but this trampoline is awesome for a variety of reasons. It's actually just an Amazon trampoline. We got it off of Amazon, which made it super easy because I brought it to our door, which I love. But what I especially love is that it has several features that are really helpful. So one of them is that it comes in a variety of sizes. So it comes from an 8-foot size where it's just for little kids to jump on. So I have friends that have this size, and I think all 4 of their kids jump on it together. They're like 8 and under, and they just love that. We got the 10-foot size, which is a little bigger, but still not crazy huge, and it has a net and everything. And I love it because my husband and I can jump on it with our kids, but it's still small because I think a lot of people think of getting a trampoline as like this huge investment. It's going to take up all their yard if they don't have a very big yard. And we don't have a huge yard, but the 10-foot trampoline fits really nicely in it. There's still space in our yard for other things. It's not just the trampoline. And it's made a really, really big impact on our life because our kids spend more time outside. They ask to go outside more often. They want to jump on it with us. And they also can play on it independently. And that is because of the cool little ladder it has, where it has like actual almost like steps on the ladder. It's not just rungs. So even a 1-year-old can climb up it. I witnessed too, my own kid and someone else's kid climb up this trampoline. And so I remember the other day I was looking outside. I supervise my kids sometimes from the window. Now that they're a little older and aren't putting things in their mouth, I look outside and my kids are playing on the trampoline together because both of them can get on by themselves. And for toddler moms, this is a big win because most trampolines you either have to be able to pull yourself up on, which neither of my kids could do at this age, or you need someone to be out there constantly to boost you on and off. And I've been at other people's houses where they have a trampoline like that. And I know it's just a season, but I do love that they can just go out, get on independently, and have fun without needing me to mediate constantly. So if you are interested in that at all, go ahead, click the link below, and it will take you straight to the Calm Max trampoline that we personally have enjoyed. So thank you guys so much. Let's get back to our episode.
Some days they eat 4 servings of Brussels sprouts. Some days they eat like 1 Brussels sprout. But even if you require, like, I am open to requiring your kid to try everything on their plate, right? But even if you do that, I would really, really recommend not making it contingent on dessert. So don't make dessert this huge reward, and the only reason you would possibly want to eat your veggies or your chicken is because you're getting dessert. So we actually allow our kids, we have them try their food after they get to a certain age, but we allow them to have, if we're having dessert as a family, we allow them to have it whether they ate a couple bites of peas or whether they ate all of them and asked for seconds. It really doesn't make a difference on dessert, if that makes sense. So they're like two standalone items. So I don't serve dessert with a meal, even though some people recommend doing that, because I think kids fill up on dessert and they aren't as energized throughout the day. So I save dessert for the end of the meal, but it's not a reward. It's just like the second course of dinner if we're having it that night, if that makes sense. So it's a very, very neutral thing. We get excited about it, but it's not at all related to how many cucumber slices they ate that day. The fourth tip, or the fourth feeding mistake that I've seen parents make, is giving multiple snacks between meals. And I've kind of already hit on this a little bit. But if you're giving your kid a lot of snacks after dinner or between meals or right before dinner, and to some of you guys, this is like totally common sense. But if you're doing that, they're really not going to be hungry for dinner. I would encourage you to look at how you're structuring meals and snacks, because even if you're the one structuring them, if you're doing snacks, half an hour before the meal, that's not going to go well. So usually I structure them to where they're at least an hour to 2 hours in between. So we might eat breakfast at 7. They have a snack at 10. We have lunch at noon. And typically they're very hungry for all of those, for snack as well, but also for lunch and also for breakfast. So that can really, really help if you feel like your child is just picking at their food and they're living off of animal crackers. Maybe it's because you're serving them animal crackers when they're hungry for an entire meal. Okay, so I wanted to dive in and share with you guys the mistake that I made recently, even though I know all of this stuff, even though I had a class on feeding kids, and it had to do with peer pressure. I think this comes up a lot for parents where they have an opinion about what they should do and they feel pretty confident in it, but then they get in a peer pressure situation and they cave. So this actually happened to me. It was the first time. So you know how I just talked about not bribing your kids with dessert? I feel very strongly about that. But we were at that campfire that I was talking to you about, and I'd given my kids way too many snacks on the way there. And we got there and I asked, like, oh, do you want some burrito? And they're like, no. And you know what came out of my mouth? I told them, if you don't eat any burrito, you're not going to get any dessert. And that was the first time I've ever said that. And that goes against everything I believe. But the reason I said that was because there was someone else standing there beside me. And I was worried what she would think, because she knew that I believed in the division of responsibility, and my kids pretty much never reject dinner. And I was just shocked, and I wanted to control them, and I wanted them to eat dinner so that I didn't look like a bad parent, when in reality, I was the one that set them up for not being hungry for a meal. So all that to say, I know all these things, but as parents, we all make mistakes. We all struggle with people pleasing at different times, or embarrassment, or making decisions out of what other people think instead of what we think is best for our child. So I've been there too, and my child's relationship with food is not ruined. So if you're someone that all of these mistakes with food resonate with you, you are not alone, and it doesn't mean that all hope is lost, but I just wanted to give you guys some ideas for how to change and adapt in the future. So if you guys like this episode, please go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. That helps tell the algorithm you like this content and you want more of it. And it also helps me continue to want making more of it so I don't get discouraged. So I really appreciate it if you do that, and leave a comment. I would love to hear what the biggest mistake you made with food with your kid was and how you've overcome that. But all that to say, thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Stay at Home Wellness.